Right, it's now 6:02. We'd like to begin. So I'd like Bill to kick the meeting off. Bill, please proceed.
Well, welcome everybody to the NWSOFA Indivisible special presentation of virus-free voting, better known as vote by mail. My name's Bill Davis, along with Sarah Horan. We are the NWSOFA Indivisible Chapter co-leads. NWSOFA covers 6 townships from Elk Grove Village to the south, Lake Cook Road on the north, on the west, to Des Plaines on the east. 5,000 members of our organization, but that's not huge because we're covering an area of 6,000 people. Our secret sauce of Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action Indivisible is 20 all volunteer leads, folks just like you who recognize that grassroots leadership can make a difference. As President Obama said, one voice can change a room. And with over 6,000 indivisible chapters nationwide, we can raise the roof. We're going to do it this year. What you see on the screen right now is our snowflake side. When people say that you're just a bunch of snowflakes, they are absolutely right. Our snowflake model indicates our issue teams. And going from the very top, you'll see ACA, that is our healthcare reform team. Then going clockwise, our CIR, which is Comprehensive Immigration Reform, is our Immigration Reform and Refugee team. Our SO stands for Social Outreach. It also is for social fairness and social justice. Our Stand with Women, SWW, is exactly what it sounds like. Over the past few years, we've highlighted the ERA and equal pay among many other issues that women have. Our Fiscal and Economics team, which is actually going to have a meeting right at the end of this, does monthly national economic discussions. Tonight, they're going to be talking about the economic impact of the COVID-19. CC is our climate change, and they're fighting for the environment. They have a meeting on May 26th at 7 o'clock. Our Restore Our Democracy team, which is the team we're going to be hearing from tonight, is really highlighting and leading our NWSOFA Indivisible group on vote by mail in election security. One other team that is at the very top is our GVP, our Gun Violence Prevention Team. And they have a meeting this Thursday. Same link, virtual, about gun violence prevention and things that we can do to make a difference. So with that, I'd like to say hi to Ed Spire and Jim McGrath. A little over a year ago, they started the Restore Our Democracy team. As one of our newest teams, they really have hit the road running. Guys, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Ed Spire, and along with my partner, Jim McGrath, we lead the Restore Our Democracy project at NWSOFA. Now, today we're going to talk about how we run elections in Illinois, with a particular eye to November 2020. While we all hope our pandemic will be under control by then, we need to be prepared for the eventuality that we may still need to take many precautions to protect our health and that of our families and neighbors. This presentation today will address those specific pandemic-related concerns about the upcoming election, as well as the future direction for elections in Illinois. Our speaker today is Rose Colicino. She is the Voters' Rights Lead for Indivisible Illinois. She addresses election integrity and security concerns. Now, we only have 45 minutes for this presentation and discussion, as this StemWebEx channel will be used for the upcoming fiscal team's presentation. If you'd like to listen on that meeting as well, you can just stay on this WebEx. I highly recommend it, and I'll be staying on. So please mute your phones. If you have questions, put them in the chat. We will get to the questions at the end as time allows, and I'd like to turn things over to Rose now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it, everybody. I am going to now attempt to share my screen before I say anything else. We practice, so this should work. Okay, can you see the big blue slide, everybody?
Yep.
Yes, we can see it, Rose.
Okay, let me dive in because time is of the essence. So the title again of my presentation is Safe, Secure, and Accessible Elections, Protecting the Right to Vote During the COVID-19 Pandemic. And as Ed said, I'm Rose, and I have been working with election security and voters' rights, indivisible, since about 2016. So before I move on, though, I do want to thank Bill. I want to thank Sarah. I also want to thank my friends Jim and Ed, and I also want to thank Christine for driving the show here. I want to tell you that this presentation is action-oriented, so I am going to try to get through the material, and at the very end, there's a number of actions. Be really excited if you do agree to take some of those actions. You'll notice, I think my picture is, I'm going to actually take me off so I can see it a little better. But you'll see Common Cause listed. So yes, this is an Indivisible Illinois presentation, but it was made in partnership with Common Cause. We give it together, we give it separately sometimes. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. Half of the slides were created by my friend Tyler from Common Cause. I think a lot of this is about joining together and forming partnerships, and that's what we've tried to do. So enough about me. Here's the overview of the presentation. We will be discussing COVID's impact on elections in Illinois and Wisconsin. And the reason why is because we believe that there were lessons learned, especially I have to say in Wisconsin. I have quite a bit to share with you there. Also, we'll be getting into the nitty gritty of vote by mail. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And now is actually a really exciting time because there is activity on the state level. Our representatives will be meeting, as many of you know, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, a lot going on there. And of course, simultaneously on the federal level. So there's a lot to do. So I hope you walk away from this with a understanding of voting by mail and the intricacies behind it, and also what we need to do, and you, me, all of us, to prepare for November. And without saying more, it's a lot. As always, pictures say so much. You'll be able to figure out what this gentleman is doing right here. And let me tell you about our understanding of what happened in Illinois. So it was first reported on January 24th that a traveler returning back from Wuhan had COVID. So leading up to March 17th, all of you are very well aware, there was just a plethora of news about the potential health risks that were happening. And how in the world are we going to prepare for this election on March 17th? Full disclosure, I made my share of phone calls and emails, I believe, to Governor Pritzker because of my concerns about the pandemic and voting. So ultimately, as you are all very, very well aware, we did decide to go ahead and have the election on March the 17th. So before March 17th, election authorities in Illinois, in particular Chicago and Cook County, reported a number of issues as they prepare to host in-person voting. First, a number of polling locations had to be relocated because some of them were inside buildings with high concentrations of at-risk populations, such as our senior citizens, nursing homes, and assisted living. So over 170 sites were relocated. However, despite that, nearly 50 housing facilities for low-income seniors were used anyway, which I find very disconcerting, despite all the previous efforts we took to try to save and protect our seniors. Again, not a big surprise, large number of poll workers simply didn't show up or opted out of service at the last minute due to health concerns. Prior to election day, city and county election officials were pleading with healthy residents to volunteer as election judges, telling them they would increase their pay, waive training requirements to fill the growing void in personnel. My personal story, I've been an election judge not as long as some of my friends on the call here this evening. I was an election judge twice, not on March 17th, but prior to that. I decided to be an election judge for the first time for midterms, and that was a little crazy in itself. But I did have about a half day of training. I still was not prepared. In fact, I showed up and there were 5 of us, brand new judges. I can only imagine without training what would take place on election day. I was hearing stories of how people were deputized on the fly if they looked like they were intelligent. So a little scary. As a result, there was chaos. Hundreds of polling locations were moved or shut down, leaving voters unsure of where they were supposed to cast their ballots. For those that could find their polling place, what they found were long lines, lack of necessary PPE and cleansing supplies as a noted issue. My next slide is compliments of my partner at Common Cause, and again, very descriptive. Some of you news watchers, probably everybody on this video call, might recognize Ben Bradley. I believe he is now with WGN. So good old Ben showed up at his polling place and he saw the sign. He saw that it was relocated. So it actually wasn't that much. We learned a problem for Ben to go 12 miles away and cast his vote elsewhere. However, we're very well aware that this could most definitely be a problem for people that are trying to get to work, have childcare issues, lack transportation, and so forth. So we can only imagine the number of folks that were disenfranchised. Being a judge, even for a short time, I would imagine some of these places just didn't have enough people to cover them. However, let's bring in some good with the bad. There's actually, and I was surprised to hear some bright spots. So I want to highlight there was an increase in votes cast during early voting and with mail ballots, surprisingly. And this is according to the Cook County Clerk's Office. Return mail ballots rose by almost 52%. I found that shocking. From the record set in 2016, and early voting accounted for 56% of total votes cast. In 2016, that was 22%. So in Chicago, city election officials announced that early voting records had been broken. A little more good news. As we can see, early voting and voting by mail were alternatives for a lot of people that, quite frankly, were worried about casting their vote with COVID. However, this is what we need to keep in mind. While there might be a decline period over the summer, and I think all of you pay attention to this, we have heard that come the fall, it is going to be flu season. And according to Dr. Fauci and other healthcare professionals, the pandemic could come back in the fall with a vengeance. Since we don't really know what's going to happen, we really have to start now, if not a month ago, and do the best we can to prepare for November. Illinois must learn what happened to us in March. And also, I think the whole world, if not just the US's eyes, were on Wisconsin, and we need to learn from what went wrong there, and hopefully be able to have a successful November election. All right, so I was told a while ago that pictures are so much better than bullets, and here's another one. I think the media was saturated with photos from Wisconsin. I certainly saw my share, and this one I felt was really poignant. I also want to tell you that I was personally invested in Wisconsin. I live here in Illinois, but I've been wanting to help Wisconsin win for 2020 because it's a battleground state. And also, since election security in Illinois is important to me, obviously it's important in Wisconsin. And I decided to volunteer for the Wisconsin Voter Hotline. So I had the privilege of speaking to Wisconsin voters during the early voting and also the debacle of the election on the 7th. So what happened in Wisconsin? Actually, quite a bit. Let's dig a little deeper. So with the hotline experience, I think it's best, before I get into the business side of things, to tell you some personal stories. These are people that I had the honor and privilege of speaking with on the phone that did their darnest to cast their vote in Wisconsin. Unfortunately, a lot of them were unsuccessful. The first story is a really nice lady I spoke with that was at a nursing home, and she had never in her whole life had ever missed an election. She had it all set up. This was before the nursing homes closed down. to get a ride, and she was going to get there somehow, some way. But as you know, the nursing homes closed down. She ordered her absentee ballot as she was supposed to. It never arrived. So we had the opportunity not to just receive calls from these people, we also followed up with them. And I found out that this woman was not for the first time able to cast her vote. A woman that was a little younger I had spoken to, she had just torn her ACL, I believe it's called, and she was on crutches. So she had again requested her ballot, didn't get it on time, not her fault, not even really the clerk's fault. I think everybody did the best they can. There was just too much going on. And she went to stand in line for a couple hours with her crutches. But I've got to say, everybody, the story that still sticks with me, and I'm in conversation with this gentleman, is this rather young man who had a stroke. So what we do is we take their first name, last name, and their date of birth. And I found out that this gentleman, young to me, was born in the 70s, had a stroke, and just a series of complications, the health issues, the address, and the whole kit and caboodle. He was not able to vote. I just want to add, one of the complexities is that in Wisconsin, you have to take a picture of your ID, apply that to your application, and also get a witness signature. So in some ways, in Illinois, we're lucky. So digging a little more thoroughly into things. So what happened here? With the pandemic, obviously, as you would imagine, kind of similarly to what happened in Illinois, in Wisconsin, it became all about absentee ballots. On March the 15th, it seems like it was longer ago than that, doesn't it? It's when the Wisconsin health authorities urged the public to practice social distancing. So when the absentee ballot push began, the hero election clerks only had 26 days to prepare, which I think even those of us that have not been engaged know that that's not enough time. Wisconsin is similar to Illinois in that usually people go to the polls. It's usually 10% of the people that order absentee ballots. In this case, because of the pandemic, it was 80%. I haven't been able to find an updated number, but what I have here is unofficial and incomplete data indicate that total absentee voting use ballooned to 1.27 million absentee ballots being issued. The folks in WIC, Wisconsin Elections Commission, didn't have the personnel, they didn't have the equipment to process all of that, all of those ballots. And I'm also learning, I'm not an IT person, but there has to be a reconfiguration of systems. And it was extremely, extremely difficult. Many voters, again, that I spoke with and described above, did what they were supposed to do. They ordered the ballot on a timely basis and just didn't get it. And adding to the confusion, I don't know if some of you followed along, but it was a little crazy. There were rulings back and forth. There was disagreement, most definitely, between the governor, the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and ultimately, and kind of bizarrely, the US Supreme Court. Voters in Wisconsin were able to follow their ballots because they had something that we don't have, a tracking system, somewhat similar to FedEx. So I believe the URL is myvote.y.gov if you want to check it out. Some say we should have something similar in Illinois if we could get it by November. So what it came down to, and the Wisconsinites, being polite as they are, kept apologizing to me, and I kept apologizing to them. As part of this program I was involved in, the hotline, we were not actually, strangely, encouraging people to go to the polls. I commend the Wisconsin Democratic Party. We put people's health in front of our desire to have their votes. So we really left it up to them, which I think some people found that strange to talk to me on the phone, and they were not being encouraged to go to the polls if they felt they were at risk. So for voters who did decide to go to the polls, many of them faced extremely long lines, sometimes on their feet and sometimes in their cars. Also, there were sanitation issues. And pay attention to this number, please. So the number of polling places in Milwaukee was reduced from 180 to 5. And some felt like the folks in Milwaukee were targeted. So percentage-wise, that's 97% of Milwaukee polling locations closed. Then, as you can imagine, droves of poll workers, many of whom are at the at-risk category, felt they had no choice and they canceled. If you want to know the number I have, the last time I checked, was 7,000 poll workers in Wisconsin didn't show up for work on April the 7th. And I can't say that I blame some of them. An updated report tells us horrifically that the number of COVID cases in all of Wisconsin is estimated close to 71. And there has been affiliation with folks that went to the polls and did come down with the virus. My true sincere hope is that we can learn lessons from all this. I can provide much more material for those interested. There's an 11-page report from the Wisconsin Election Commission. There's also a 2-page memo from Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight looking at what happened and what we could all do better next time. Again, pictures, graphs, all say so much more. Here's the amazing uptick in absentee ballots from March 16th to April 2nd. I'll let you take a look at that while I take a sip. And I don't really know if there's any blame to be cast here. From what I read, the clerks really did a Herculean effort with the time that they had. And again, they just didn't have the right stuff to get it done. So we are going to switch gears. I'm trying to be attentive to the clock here. We're going to talk more about vote by mail. As I mentioned, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And my goal here is to hopefully share with you the problems that we had, and then towards the end, share with you some of the solutions. So casting a ballot by mail is not a new phenomenon in the United States of America. Casting ballot by absentee, as we sometimes say, actually began, I found this fascinating, in the Civil War. So there were soldiers that were allowed to vote from the battlefield, and then they had their ballot sent home to be counted. This also happened again during World War II. I don't quite know why. I didn't dig into the research, but it wasn't until the 1980s when California allowed citizens to request absentee ballots by mail. The process, of course, varies state to state, but there are some universal issues to consider. These are some of the things that election officials have to think about. Title equipment, as I mentioned, printing costs, where they get their paper and their envelopes from, the cost of postage, both to and from. Is it prepaid? That's a sore point for me. I feel that postage should be prepaid. Otherwise, it's a poll tax, in my opinion. Supporting documentation. Not everybody, of course, speaks English, so we have to have supporting documentation for that. Keep in mind, in Illinois, depending on how you look at it, some people say 108, I say 102. Jurisdictions are doing things differently. We have to have enough of poll workers and poll observers. I saw a report from 2016 about how hard it was to get poll workers. I can only imagine how challenging it's going to be for November. We really have to start now. Finally, signatures must be verified and cured, as they say, which is an important security measure. This is done sometimes, I believe, like in Cook County, through electronic systems, and sometimes in smaller jurisdictions by election judges. So I'd like to say that we've tried to gather as much information as possible. I think it's important that we speak to our representatives about vote by mail, but also with the clerks. I think they sometimes are neglected. We definitely need to set up relationships with them. I've had the opportunity to speak to a very knowledgeable clerk in Peoria. Actually, someone on our team has been able to speak to CBOE, Chicago Board of Elections, Lance Dove. Ed and I actually had a really great appointment with the Cook County Clerk's office. And I've also run into the Lake County Clerk. All of these people are incredibly important to our elections going off well in November. So it's, again, important to reach out and have conversations with these people. We need to educate not only ourselves, but also our friends and neighbors about what is upcoming. All right, another photo we found, which we feel is descriptive for these purposes. You can't really speak about vote by mail unless you talk about the post office. Granted, the post office is more of a federal legislation issue, but it really has to be front and center. And some of this information I'm going to share with you, I was able to be a bug on the wall during a conference call that Nancy Pelosi wasn't allowed to speak, but I was able to listen. It was a conference call between Nancy Pelosi and a lot of the grassroots groups that she needs support from. One of the groups was the gentleman leader from the Postal Union. So some of this information is from him. Actually, this isn't. the fact that the Constitution gives Congress the power to establish the post office. I just like saying that out in the front because there are changes that some folks are trying to make. The Postal Service employs more than 600,000 people. They come to work every day and bring us our medicine, our census envelopes, voter registration, voter applications, voter ballots in some cases, and of course, a whole lot more. The US Postal Service is a lifeline truly for millions of Americans, and many, of course, are planning to use it to cast their vote by mail absentee ballot. Let's look at the business side of things for them. Mail volume is down. Revenue is also down by 50%. There is no taxpayer funding for the post office. I don't think I really realized that until I started to prepare for this presentation. Without additional emergency funding, this comes from the union gentleman from the post office. He's telling us the post office will run out of money this summer. We are told that we need $25 billion in relief, and there's bipartisan support. Both Republicans and Democrats support saving the post office. There is now, and I'll be talking about this later, a new bill on the federal side called the HEROES Act that the House, I believe, recently passed, and I believe it has about $25 billion in for the post office. I want to add to the all the confusion that's going on there that a new postmaster general, a top GOP fundraiser and Trump supporter, has been appointed. I don't know if he's officially in yet. When Congress tried to previously add $13 billion in a direct grant for the Postal Service, an administration official responded that, quote, "We told them very clearly that the president was not going to sign off on the bill if money for the post office was in there," end quote. This, we feel, is detrimental to the people of our country. This is from the union gentleman, we need to flip the script. I agree with him. The entire idea of voting by mail is predicated on the existence of a funded and functioning postal service. We must demand that our elected officials save the post office. This is a map that my partner, Tyler, from Common Cause developed for us. I think he did a really good job. He used data from Vote at Home, which is a good organization if you personally want to do more research. And from this map, you can see that we're on the spectrum. Different states do different things. I want to, however, break down the categories for you. There are 4 distinct categories, color-coded for you. There are 5 states that do truly universal vote by mail, and some of them, if not a lot of them, have been doing it for a long time. There's no excuse absentee with a permanent mail ballot option. There's no excuse absentee. That's where both Illinois and Wisconsin fall. I bring up Wisconsin because it's not always easy. No excuse absentee means different things to different states. And there's also excuse absentee. I do feel that that is voter suppression. In some cases, you have to be over 65, but they make it harder. In those states, less places, less individuals are able to get their absentee ballot. So what's the overall status? Well, first of all, I want to tell you if Illinois, as you know, we already have vote by mail, but what we are trying to do is expand it. And if we do try to expand it, we will not be a pioneer. Multiple states already have it. They are Colorado since 2013, Hawaii, Oregon, 2000, Utah, and Washington since 2011. I'm putting in the dates for when I have them. These states conduct their elections almost entirely by mail, offering successful models on how it can be implemented across the country. In 2016, more than 23% of the voters cast their vote by mail. So we are fighting that vote by mail improves voter turnout, and that's what it's all about. We want more registered voters to have the ability to have their voices heard and cast their ballot. So for turnout, states that allowed expanded vote by mail had on average a 15.5 percentage points higher turnout rate than states that did not in 2018. So here's a chart for you. So for the 2020 general election this November, this is the question that was asked. Do you approve or disapprove of states using only vote by mail instead of voting in person? So you can see the wide majority favored, 67% favored voting by mail. Because of time, I'm going to fly through some of these, and I think you're probably aware of what a lot of this means, but universal vote by mail That's what the 5 states have that I mentioned earlier. So in those 5 states, Colorado and the rest, every registered voter is mailed a ballot. And I want to say some folks think that means no polling places, but it does not. There are voting centers and there are opportunities for folks to vote in person if that's how they choose to vote. No excuse absentee in our state. This is what we use. And I think you're all very well versed on what that means because I know you're all voters, but I want to point out a couple of things. So one of the main differences between no excuse absentee and universal, where we just were the other chart, is the infrastructure. While the process is similar, these states tend to lack the high level of technology that universal states utilize. So instead of everybody having high-speed ballot processors, an election authority is not in all cases. Basically, we don't have the machine. We have election judges in a lot of cases counting the vote. This is the back-end disconnect that makes it difficult to quickly scale up, and these are some of the issues that perhaps our legislature is going to be discussing this week. I don't know if this requires further explanation. I don't think so. Excuse absentee. Hopefully we're able to decrease, if not eliminate, this voter suppression way to get your ballot. I don't think these days we can have any conversation without talking about disinformation. I talk about it when I talk about winning in 2020 for various races, and we most certainly have to talk about it when it comes to election security. All of you are probably well aware of the disinformation that was out there in 2016, and I just read something this morning about some of the operatives that are working on disinformation campaigns right now. And I'm sure they've been working on them since 2016, if not before. So this is kind of a comical cartoon, but it's actually not that funny of a situation. Recently, it was claimed that allowing people to vote by mail would result in widespread fraud, and it was cited that there were concerns with ballot harvesting. The fact of the matter is there is no basis for this claim. Voter fraud in general is already incredibly rare in the United States. Vote by mail states continue to have, and I pause here to highlight my words, some of the most secure elections in the country and report exceedingly low amounts of fraud cases. These are some of the security measures that are taken. These are the reasons why. There's an identity verification, providing sensitive personal identifying information to obtain ballots and envelopes. There's signature verification that we spoke about a little bit before, voter-specific barcodes on each ballot. There's ballot tracking, secure drop boxes, post-election audits, which are music to my ears, as some of you know, and finally, polling place sites as fail-safe. I get asked about fraud a lot, and I just want to cite some examples to you. So yes, I know Oregon is a little different than Illinois, but they, again, have been conducting their elections by mail since 2000. They sent out more than 100 million ballots and only documented about a dozen cases of proven fraud. That's less than 0.6000000. I think I said that right, 1% of all votes cast. In past presentations, it was brought up to me that Oregon is Oregon and Illinois is Illinois. So I did a little ad hoc, I'm not a researcher, I did a little ad hoc research. According to violent crime statistics of 2020, Chicago does outdo Portland, almost 50% to 21%. But I found this interesting. Property crime, Chicago versus Portland, Chicago 46% and Portland 72%. So I think maybe it's a closer analogy than some people think. A different analysis found that in all states between 2000 and 2012, there were only 491 cases of absentee ballot fraud that occurred. So please keep that in mind. All right. I'm paying attention to the clock. Yes.
Rose, this is Ed. You only have 9 minutes left. Please finish up.
Yes, and that should be sufficient without me talking too quickly. Thanks for the heads up, Ed. So how do we prepare for November? I should keep up with my slides. As you can imagine, we're Americans, Democrats, Republicans. The options are plentiful. So some say that we should require that states provide envelopes with prepaid postage to voters who receive a voter registration application, vote by mail application, and a ballot itself. Some say we should extend early in-person voting. Some say expand online voter registration, actually a set of these things. Some say we should start recruiting now and take regulated measures to protect the health of voters and poll workers, implementing CDC and best practices. Also, conduct outreach campaigns to inform the public of practices. I have to say all of the above, and I'm going to add one more. Let's immediately quash disinformation as it arises. I want to hurry up to this slide because I think you're all very curious about what is happening in Illinois. And once again, a lot is happening in Illinois. So Senator Julie Morrison introduced a bill some time ago, which she presented and is actually being assessed by House leadership. We've had the opportunity to get a seat at the table with Senator Julie Morrison. I've had some direct conversations with him and with her, and she is a personal hero. She is fighting very hard to get a ballot in every registered voter's hands. We at Indivisible Illinois support that bill, and we hope that the rest of Indivisible Illinois does too. So Senator Morrison, I want to give you some direct quotes instead of paraphrasing for her. I believe that every registered voter should get a ballot. And again, so does Rose. We still don't have a bill number as far as I know. According to Politico, Speaker Madigan is in favor of vote by mail legislation. However, we don't know what that means. We don't know if that means he's in favor of sending applications to registered voters, or if he's in favor of ballots to registered voters, or none of the above. We will, I hope, find out soon. The Assembly is in session tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. It's my information that I received from various parties that a lot of times election legislation happens at the dead of night. But there have been, I want to say, a lot of us, Bill included, by the way, that have been phone calling and using social media to tag our elected representatives, letting them know what we want to happen. So if I can't stress enough, this week is critical for November. I ask you to please call the governor, your reps, senators, your clerk, and put pressure on House leadership. We have a working document that I have tagged at the end of this presentation, which includes contact information, scripts, it's been workshops, and hopefully you find everything on there that you need. We are being told just yesterday that phone calls are important, but that for whatever reason, I heard this from my friends at the league, emails are of importance. They are checking email more frequently perhaps than phone calls, our representatives are. And I want to invite you all. Again, Bill has participated. We are going to be having a phone bank and social media blitz tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Again, I have all the links for you that if you're interested, you can get in. I want to let you know that Bill and I and others participated in a Twitter storm. If you want to find out what that is, show up tomorrow. And Bill, who I believe had never tweeted before, is now a tweeting machine. And maybe because of him, we have about 2 million impressions from our activity from last Saturday and a reach over 639. If you don't know what that means, it means that we did really well. We've also partnered with folks in the national arena of Indivisible that are using social media to get the federal legislation passed. I want to populate this. This chart is going to become even more important as we find out what happens with the legislation. And I don't expect to fail, but if we don't get what we want, we're going to switch gears and go into full-blown education mode. Starting August 5th, unless we're able to make it sooner, that's the first day you can apply for an absentee ballot. We want to make everybody and their brother and sister aware of that. On October the 29th, all requests by mail must be received by the election authority. And then on November 2nd, all in-person voting requests must be made. So this is the indivisible position. I want to highlight really number one. We feel that every registered voter should get a ballot and ensure that jurisdictions include envelopes with prepaid postage for all voters. Our mission statement is plain and simple. We demand safe, secure, and accessible elections to protect the right to vote during the pandemic and beyond. I quickly, because of time, just want to tell you, oh, I do want to tell you, sorry, I promised Common Cause that I would tell you they have not taken a position. I want to make sure I get that out there. So on the federal level, you're probably aware there's a bill that passed the House. We're going to have to work real hard to get it to pass the Senate. But the bill does include, as mentioned, $25 billion for the U.S. Postal Service and $3.6 billion for big election reforms. I have quite a few here listed. I'm just going to list the top three. Nationwide, no excuse absentee voting, ballots mailed to all voters in emergencies, and 15-day early voting. I didn't tell you, which I want to, that the first CARES package, Illinois, it was $400 million for the country, and Illinois received about 16 million of that.
Hey, Rose,
All right, I made it. And I know I'm out of time, but if you just give me the opportunity to go through this slide, is that okay, Jim?
yeah, I was just saying, let's let everybody look at this slide. We've got a couple of questions on the chat board that I want to make sure we get to because we're just about ready to close.
Okay, if I could just real quickly call these things out, because this is really the most important part of the presentation, if I could, please. So I'll go really fast. So locally, we have tools for you to use to call all the aforementioned people I mentioned. There's also, if you just want to call this 188 number, it gets you right to our senators. That in the blue document has everything that you need. It's our North Star. There's social media phone banks. Like I told you, there's one tomorrow, and there's a link to get into that. And there's letters to the editor. Thank you, Jim, for letting me get that out, hopefully quickly.
Sure. First question, I'm not sure who's going to take this, but what are the logistics in Chicago at this point to request a vote by mail ballot? If the legislation being proposed, will that change anything in Chicago?
Well, Senator Morrison is holding firm that she wants a ballot in the registered voters mailbox, prepaid postage. However, we really don't know, Jim. We don't know what's going to happen with that. If it does fly, even if it doesn't fly, and there's a change that voters all get an application. I've heard rumors. I was actually up late last night reading all the different reports from different parties, including a Illinois Women's Democratic Caucus and also North County clerks. Everybody wants something different. So I wouldn't want to be the legislators this week, because they're going to try to have to assimilate. They had to buy the equipment yesterday. So I think the question is getting at, will we be prepared? Most definitely. There's small jurisdictions, there's large. We definitely would need new equipment to process the intensity of the absentee ballots. I hope that answers.
Yeah, can people in Chicago request a vote by mail ballot online now, as you can in Cook?
No, not until August the 5th. And there are parties that are trying to change that. In fact, the Women's Caucus, if I'm not confusing the different groups, I believe it was the House Women's Democratic Caucus in Springfield. They are pushing to open that up now. And I think that would be very wise. I really don't think that we can wait until August 5th. I believe that I'm not a parliamentarian, but I believe there has to be legislation for that. So perhaps that's something that will be considered between now and Friday.
Okay, and this may be a question for Ed. It's regarding Kane County voting machines. The commenter says they're very complicated. Ed, I don't know if you have any comment about that.
I have no experience with Kane County. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I do want to mention to you, if I could, I had a conversation with a very knowledgeable clerk who's not from this area, but he knows everybody and everything. And he feels that Kane and Lake would be two places that would be able to handle the plethora of absentee ballots if we would go either via application to everybody or a ballot to everybody. That Kane and Lake would be able to handle it.
Okay, question is, will we have a copy of this presentation on the NWSOFA website? I think we can put a link to it. I think Christine is going to put it on YouTube. Okay, next question is, and I think this is what concerns a lot of people. There's rumors that the Wisconsin Post Office lost a lot of, or hundreds of mail-in ballots. Is that true? And are there undelivered ballots still being found in Wisconsin?
I really don't know, to tell you the truth. I can follow up. I did hear rumors in that regard, but I did not follow up to verify. I know that there are conversations between Wisconsin and the Postal Service, as well as Illinois and the Postal Service, to prepare. But I can get
One
back to
thing
you and
we-
try to do a little research on that.
One thing we
Okay.
do know about that topic, is that many ballots were received late. And there was a Wisconsin Supreme Court ruling that allowed them to count those ballots even though they were received late. So there was
That's correct.
almost 100,000 ballots that perhaps would not have been counted, but they did actually choose to count them even though they didn't come in on time.
Okay.
That's right. Thank you for that, Ed.
Yeah, we're gonna have to close here in a couple minutes. We won't close this link because the same link is going to be used for the financial presentation. But what I want to let everybody know, I got a question, is this slide that's now going to be sent out to everybody. Yes, I will take care of that. The other thing I will do is I have a video that addresses much of the concerns that people have over vote by mail, that I will also send a link out to everybody who signed up for that video. Okay. So I think we'd like to thank everybody for joining. I hope this was helpful. And I guess will a copy of the presentation be posted? Rose, I don't know, do you want to post the presentation?
I sent it. I think you have the most current version. So
Okay,
you
I mean,
can
I can
post
go
it
with it. It's up to
wherever
you.
you want to.
Okay,
Okay,
You
we'll
can do
post
with it whatever you want. It's all yours. You
All
own
right.
it
Well,
now.
well, Rose, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate the effort you put in today. And please remember, folks, the legislature is meeting this week. You need to call your representatives and to call Mike Madigan or email them and let them know that you want to see a ballot in every mailbox for this November so that people can vote safely without risking their health. Thank you all for attending. We really appreciate your time, and it's time to make this happen now. It's got to happen in this legislation session. It's got to happen before the end of the month. If the rules in Illinois are, if some bill has to be passed after the end of May, it needs a supermajority, which means it won't happen because there's a lot of people downstate on the other side that don't want to see this happen. So it's got to happen now, and it's got to happen this week. We have to make it happen this week. So get on your legislators, please. Thank you all.
thanks, everybody. So we're just gonna leave the link open for the financial meeting.